which I think actually kind of leads us into our next topic, which is Cade Cunningham's contract extension. And that is coming up. He is extension eligible this offseason. I think I'm not going to speak for you, but I think both you and I do expect him to sign a contract extension with the Pistons for, I believe it would be, what, 5 years, $226 million. That's a long time, and that's a lot of money. Let's shoot. You might be tuning into this because you clicked on my tweet where I ripped into Mike Valenti and Rico Beard for just spouting off of the mouth saying that Cade Cunningham wouldn't play over Al Horford for the Boston Celtics. Brain blast, Jimmy Neutron. They play different positions. It's just not how the NBA works. And I see a lot of people saying, hey, $226 million, is he worth it? For a little bit of context there, and I'm going to ask you your opinion on this. The cap hit that would be, which would be $45.2 million a year, would put Cade as the 19th highest played player in the NBA in terms of average salary. Kind of high, not that high. Do you think, and that's not even counting all the other players that are going to sign free agent contracts, extensions of their own. So that probably would go even lower, actually, if we're being honest with ourselves, over the next year. Aaron, do you think that this is premature to talk about extending Cade Cunningham? Do you think it's a necessity, like some people do, or do you fall somewhere kind of in the middle?
I don't think talking about extending Cade Cunningham is premature whatsoever. In fact, if I were the Detroit Pistons, I would be praying I can get him locked in this summer. I would pay him the max, hands down, with no worries in my mind. You're talking about a 22-year-old coming off a season where he averaged 23 points, 7.5 assists, 4 rebounds, and 45% shooting and 35.5% three-point shooting at 22 years old. Who are the Pistons going to spend money on? Who is coming here? Who is going to Detroit that is near the level of player that Cade Cunningham is? I'll sit and wait because you're not going to have an answer. I'm going to be sitting and waiting for a very, very long time. I don't understand how you can look at the team. Like, this is where, to me, even though the numbers say he's worth the money as well, but this is where if you watch the games, I feel like you're going to very clearly be on the side of pay Cade Cunningham, whatever, whenever. If you don't watch the games, I still don't know how you look at his stats and be like, yeah, that's not a guy worth that money. Go look at the guys that average the numbers that Cade Cunningham averages and tell me how much they're making. And tell me how they're regarded across the league. Cade Cunningham's worth every penny of the max extension. The Pistons are not going to get a player near his level in free agency, and they're probably not going to be able to trade for a player of his caliber in free agency unless they use Cade Cunningham to get that caliber of player. I can't believe this is a discussion. I'm not surprised that the specific talking heads have that sort of mindset on it. I wasn't surprised by the takes whatsoever, but it's crazy to me that we're sitting here having this conversation because if Cade Cunningham walked in the door and said, as soon as I'm extension eligible, I want to get together and I want to sign it and I want to announce it, I'd be saying absolutely yes. We'll call you at 12:01 as soon as you're eligible. Like, I don't understand how this is even a discussion.
I mean, I'm in the same boat as you. I think it's just like you pay him. I don't think there's any question. You're not going to get anybody better, whether it's via trade or if you are in some reason insane enough to just let him walk as a free agent, a la Greg Monroe or something like that. Like, no, this ain't Greg Monroe. Cade Cunningham is a stud. And look, you're going to get people who say, oh, well, they won 14 games last year. That's his fault. Of all the problems on the Pistons, I think that Cade was the only non-problem for the Pistons for the majority of this season. And I think you can look at, perhaps his overall efficiency last year. You can look at win shares or whatever, if that's your thing, if that's what really gets your rocks off, like go for it, big dog. But I'm not looking at win shares. I'm looking at the last 37 games of the season when he stopped playing next to Killian Hayes, who is, by the way, out of the NBA and probably will never get another NBA contract again, as his starting backcourt mate. And you move Jaden Ivey, who has not been amazing last year, but at least is an NBA player. Cade's last 37 games, 23.6 points, 7.8 assists, 4.6 rebounds, 3 turnovers. And I think that's a very, very important thing as well. People talk about Cade like he's turning the ball over 6 times a game. Didn't happen once he got an actual NBA player next to him and they gave him just a modicum of spacing. The turnovers went way down. And I think you look at the efficiency in that time period, 47% overall from the floor, 38% from three on 5 attempts per game, 86% from the line. That's an all-star guard right there. And so the way I look at it is if you could just give him an actual NBA team, give him that money, he's going to be worth every single penny of it by the time it's over. And within 2-3 years, it's going to be a great contract for your team. I just don't see why you wouldn't pay him. I don't get the argument for not trade him for what? What are you going to trade him for?
Yeah.
I just don't get it. Like, really, honestly, Aaron, like, what do you think they could get back in a trade for Cade Cunningham? 2 first-round picks, like 2 mid-lottery picks?
Yeah,
3?
I don't even think it's worth playing that game because if you undervalue Cade Cunningham's trade value, then you're almost proving these people's points saying he's not worth the money. But I mean, I don't know what he would be worth. Like it just comes back to me as like, I don't know how you look at him or you look at his numbers, you look at, how he plays and say he's not worth it. No, everyone will cry about his turnovers. Well, he ended up averaging 3.4 turnovers per game last season. That was 0.1 more turnovers per game than he averaged in his second season, but he averaged an assist and a half more this past year than he did in his second season. So his assists went up by 1.5 per game, and his turnovers barely rose. He averaged 3.7 turnovers per game in his rookie season, so still down from his career high. People will talk about the injuries. Only played 62 games last year. Let's be honest, folks. For all the adults in the room, if the Pistons were in any sort of contention, whether it be for the play-in, for a playoff spot, God be for a title one day, Cade Cunningham would have played the final 7 games of the year. So he would have been at about 69, 70 games played rather than 62. And if you're getting 70 games out of a player in this day and age, that's very freaking good. So he was very healthy last year, all things considered. I mean, it didn't make sense for the Pistons to play Cade Cunningham when they were playing for absolutely zero last year and playing a bunch of G Leaguers. So I think that's a stupid argument as well. You want to talk about extensions for guys like Jaden Ivey or Jalen Duren and questioning the validity of those? That's a different discussion. Those are worthwhile discussions. You're talking about a guy that is probably going to be an all-star next year. He's putting up fantastic numbers that very few players in the league are able to replicate. You sign him to that max extension because he's the best thing to happen to this damned franchise in the last decade, since Blake Griffin, honestly. I mean, it's a no-doubter that you keep Cade Cunningham because he is the best player that this team has had since Blake Griffin's 2018-19 season. I mean, and he's only 22 years old, so he's going to continue to get better. He's going to continue to be a more effective player. And Cade, if you listen to Cade talk, like you hear a leader, you hear a young man mature for his age. Again, I think it's hard because we so often just view these guys as grown men playing basketball. Cade Cunningham is 22 in a league full of guys that are 28, 30, 32. And he is one of the most mature, one of the most vocal leaders that has been on this team in recent years. He has that leader mentality. He has that energy of a leader. Dare I say that aura of a leader. It makes no sense to me. I know I've said that probably a dozen times during this conversation, but I still know there are going to be people that try to say he's not worth it. And good luck fielding a team next year without Cade Cunningham on the roster. I mean, 14 wins, you're looking at 10 wins if you're lucky. This is ridiculous.
Another thing that I'll say is, I've heard people say, well, he can't be the best player on a championship team. That is completely irrelevant. Like, it's completely irrelevant to the conversation. Guys who are not the best players on their team get paid max contracts. That's just the way the NBA works these days. Like, look, you can just look at the names of players who would be getting paid more than Cade would next year. Tell me if any of these guys are the best player on a championship team. Karl Anthony Towns, Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal, Tyrese Halliburton, Jimmy Butler, Domantas Sabonis. None of these guys are the best player on a championship team. But that's the way the NBA works, the way that the contracts play out. Even if you don't believe that Cade is the guy, like the guy in that Luka tier, it doesn't matter. You still pay him this money because that's the way that the NBA operates. So to me, there's really no logical argument for not paying him this. Even if you don't believe that he is the best player on a championship team, even if you don't believe that he is a perennial MVP candidate, whatever it is, it's still a good contract, to be completely honest with you. If you can lock up a guy from his age 23 to his age 28 season for what is going to, by his second year into it, be top 25 barely money, it's a no-brainer. It's just an absolute no-brainer. Even if he's not a top 25 player, even if he's top 30, it's a no-brainer. So to me, there's just really no logical argument you can make against paying Cade Cunningham. He's 22. He has improved every single year. He's cut down on the bad things. He's improved on the good things. There's a clear upward trajectory for him. Even if the results aren't there, all I ask is, like, don't worry about the money you're spending on Cade Cunningham. Worry about the money you're spending on the rest of your roster, because that is how this team can actually get better, not by trading away their best player.
Mm-hmm. And I think another point I'll make here is look at how he's viewed across the league, like from opposing coaches, opposing players. Like he is talked about in such a high regard, and people in the know understand the type of situation that he's in and how well he's handled it. When you look at other stars, I mean, heck, look at Zion Williamson in New Orleans. Like, look at how his first years in the league have gone. I mean, do you think he would have handled playing in Detroit, playing for these rosters, the way that Cade Cunningham has? The guy has gotten, hit in the face a million times and taken it like an absolute champ. Now, I would be more, I wouldn't be surprised if a player in his situation would be like, look, get me out of here. I'm going into year 4. You haven't given me a roster worth my time. Get me out. And he's not. We haven't heard that. There's no indication that that's the case. There's some indication that things could change if things don't change for this team, but that hasn't been the case. Cade Cunningham has been all in on turning this thing around and being part of turning this thing around, and the Pistons haven't held up their end of the bargain. So that's what would matter more for me, or sticks out more to me, is like Cade Cunningham's been more than willing, but has been very, very, tried and true in trying to help change things in Detroit, and the franchise hasn't done enough to help him and to help turn this thing around. It's not the other way around. It's on the Pistons, not Cade. So the Pistons should feel blessed that Cunningham, would be willing to sign that max contract, and they should get it done as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think we're in total agreement on this. There's no real logical argument to not pay him. The rookie max is not something that you give to a player because of what they've done. It's something you give to a player because of what you believe they can do. And frankly, they're lucky he hasn't made an all-star team or an all-NBA team, because they'd have to pay him a lot more if he did. So they better be hoping he doesn't make an all-star squad next year. Even though I think he's very much going to be in contention. Like, this is not like a Tyrese Maxey, not Tyrese Maxey, a Tyreek Evans type deal, where a guy comes in and he's awesome his rookie year and he's got some flaws, and then as the years go on, those flaws get exposed more and more. It's been the opposite with Cade. He came in, he had certain flaws that he struggled with, and he's improved upon them. even within this very last season. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure multiple people are going to disagree with us and say we're stupid because the Pistons won 14 games last year, and therefore Cade Cunningham is not a winner. Um, but go off. That's all I got to say to that. Go off, enjoy. I will be sitting over here pristine, serene, enlightened in the knowledge that I have. So
A 22-year-old averaging 23, 8 and 4 a game, and people trying to wish him off this team. You guys like pain. You guys like losing. I don't know. I really don't know. I think that's just a hilarious discussion. I did not think that that was going to be something that we actually had to talk about on the podcast at all. Like, I felt like it was a pretty foregone conclusion that Cade was worth every penny he's able to get. But when the most prominent talking heads in the city bring it up, and you find out that there are some people that also feel that way, it really makes you wonder. But